My first 6 months of sobriety, I worked at the Starbucks in Simsbury, Connecticut, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Talk about having to get humble. For every once in a while, I'd be like, "Do you know who I am?" In my head, I'd say that, and I'd be like, "No, I'm a guy that burnt his life to the ground and now needs to work at Starbucks and go to meetings every day to re-enter into society." I stay very connected to the recovery community. I'm very active in showing up, partially to be of service, because I've learned that's good for me, and partially because it just makes me feel good to be part of that. I've got this spiritual medicine I can connect to. And by the way, if I heard myself 13 years ago use a phrase like spiritual medicine, I just would have wanted to puke. Not only am I not religious, I think anything spiritual is nonsense. I thought I was real smart. Well, it turns out I'm not as smart as I think I am. And that when I'm willing to surrender to something that I don't necessarily even understand, my ego gets out of the way and interesting things happen. Certainly anyone that's having a hard time, that's struggling, I'm happy to connect and either talk or connect them with someone that can.
I'm glad you said that, because you said earlier, if anybody needs help, please reach out. So Please reach out to Nate Thomas on LinkedIn or otherwise, or reach out to Kurt Wilkin, and we'll make sure you get help, because we want to be there for you. Welcome to Unlocking Moves, where we want to cover those key pivotal moments and decision points that really change the lives of successful entrepreneurs and leaders. And I want to hear their stories, because I think we learn the most from stories. But I want to hear not just your glory stories, Nate. I want to hear your gory stories, because as I like to say, the bigger the shit show, the bigger the lesson. So my guest today is an entrepreneur in whom I've invested. And when you hear his story, you're going to understand why I invested. Nate Thomas has a story with lots of ups and downs, including overcoming addiction, which he's very open to share. Thank you for sharing. Before we get going, you probably know the drill a little bit here, Nate, but I'd like to hit my guests up with an off-the-wall question or comment to
Can't wait.
Keep them on their toes, keep my audience on their toes. You ready for this?
I'm ready.
All right. So you have a degree from Duke University.
This is true.
You have a JD or a law degree from WashU in St. Louis.
This is also true.
Both fantastic universities with the highest esteem.
This is true.
But the thing that caught my eye on your LinkedIn is the time you spent with the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater,
Yes.
where you did improv and comedy sketch writing.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Nice. Okay. Well, great question. And not too hard. I can field this one. I am not too thrown off. So Upright Citizens Brigade is a comedy troupe. It's a comedy school in New York City. Amy Poehler, who's pretty famous, was one of the founders of it, along with a few other folks. And this is, I put it on my LinkedIn because I think it adds, some character to who I am as a person. I'm more than just those degrees. And I started studying comedy I've always loved comedy. But this was a gift of early sobriety for me. So we can talk about my sobriety, but it's a big part of, I wouldn't be an entrepreneur right now if I hadn't gotten sober. I wouldn't have worked at Goldman Sachs, which is a cool part of my background. I wouldn't have, in my first 6 months of sobriety, got into hot yoga and all these cool things if I hadn't been sober. When I moved back into New York City after about a year sober, I was like, okay, I'm still figuring out what I'm doing professionally, but I want to try some fun creative stuff. And this is New York City. There's some really cool opportunities. So why don't I actually take action? This is a big theme of my life. Take action, and especially if it's uncomfortable. And I am not someone that's gets on stage and does immediately great. I'm this is going to be scary. But so I took improv classes, and you start and you're terrible, but you learn these real cool skills like yes and, which is how you build agreement in these comedy scenes. And then you have to put on a show. So I did the 101 class and the 201 class and then the 301 and 401. And then we create a little independent team, and we'd go do little shows in bar basements with 12 people in the audience. But it was a really cool way to learn some skills in comedy and frankly, just kind of to grow. And then sketch writing was just something I always wanted to try too. So,
dude, that's awesome. When I lived in Dallas 25 years ago, I used to go to the comedy club where they did improv, and I always loved it. I love whatever the show is on TV that's got
yeah. Whose Line Is It Anyway?
Yeah.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And it always just cracks me up. So thanks for sharing that.
You bet.
So as you can tell, my guest today is Nate Thomas. He is the founder of Shmoody, which is a mental health app designed with a badass user interface to really change the mental health of the world. and it's a great vision. But before he did that, he practiced law for 11 years, and he worked at Goldman Sachs.
Hmm.
So law and investment banker. No wonder you were driven to drink. Sorry for what. I'm sure you've heard that. Welcome to Unlucky Moves, Nate Thomas.
Awesome. Kurt, so glad to be here. Really happy to be talking to you. And yeah, you make my background sound more illustrious than it really is. Practicing law, but not necessarily getting it right. A lot of those were my, using days. But I did do those things, and but now I'm on a path that's much more sort of mission driven, and that was one of the things that kind of brought us together originally.
Awesome.
When we started talking.
Well, I can't wait to dive into your story. But before we do that, I usually dive into your story.
Mm-hmm.
But my gotcha question, as I call it at the beginning, I want to ask a couple of follow-ups. You mentioned Amy Poehler.
Yep.
I also saw that Adam McKay, Nick Kroll, lots of SNL folks were involved. That had to have helped with your legal career, standing up in front of a courtroom or in front of an audience.
Yeah, no, it helped me professionally for sure. Now at that point, I was still in like early sobriety, so my legal career was these kind of like really not glamorous legal jobs, but I was like making ends meet, and that was a big deal because a few years before that, I'd been like kind of unemployable because I was a serious drug addict and alcoholic. So I was holding down a steady job in law, so that was nice. And then I was learning these skills that were actually useful in my professional life. Although it's funny, it's easy to sort of miss that part of it. But you're right. Like I was on this legal project where I wasn't even a full-time employee, but I was chosen to lead this team of 20 attorneys. And it wasn't some super prestigious thing, but I was still leading this team of 20 attorneys. And the fact that I was learning these improv skills definitely helps you like think on your feet. These skills like yes and, it's a lot about active listening. And you have to learn that's a skill that you can get better and better at, right? And if you want to actually be funny and inject humor into things, there's ways to do it better than others, right? And so, yeah, it was pretty cool that I think I actually got better at like how to present myself publicly, how to stand up and like not be as afraid of putting myself out there. And then I've always thought of myself as a kind of funny person, but like it's good to learn some skills of like, oh, this is what tends to work better than other things, So yeah, it's definitely contributed.
Man, I appreciate that. I've got a goal of going to do stand-up comedy, and I keep saying I'm going to do it, but maybe you push me.
You should do it. I've actually had a goal to go do some stand-up myself, and I haven't done the stand-up. I've done the improv. And with improv, you can always blame it if it goes badly. And a lot of improv goes very badly. Well, we were in the moment and there was a group of us and it's less accountability. So it was super great for me to do it. But I think stand-up has the highest degree of accountability where if it's not funny, you have to be like, well, I wrote this. I thought it would be funny.
All right. We're going to make a pact to do it. Pick square.
We'll do it. All right, we'll do it. I'm in. 100%.
So, man, there's so much there. I want to dive into your story. And usually that's where I start with this is tell me your background, tell me what led to Shmoody. I want to go the other way around. And here's why. Because I think your story is so deep, and especially as we're recording here on July 9th, 2025, it is really applicable. But let's talk about Shmoody first, and then let's go deep into your story of recovery. Okay, so tell me why Shmoody is different from the thousands of other mental health apps out there. I know there's a reason, but tell me a little bit about it, and then I'd love to dive into your why and so forth.
So there are a lot of other mental health apps, wellness apps, what have you. We can talk about what the distinctions are in terms of the general categories. Like, just to be clear for folks that haven't heard of Shmoody, and by the way, most people have now because we're very, very popular with Gen Z and millennials. Over 1 million downloads, coming up on 2 million. But we are not a therapy app. We think therapy is amazing and many people should be in therapy. We're not a meditation app. I meditate every day. Not everyone's going to meditate. But meditation apps like Calm and Headspace have been very popular. We're a third kind of app, which is what's called a self-guided app. And this is basically an app that's going to help you with a lot of different tools, way more than just meditation or sleep. Create an action plan for your day, listen to audio on how to improve yourself, build healthy habits, track your moods, all this kind of stuff. What the other apps, when we were looking at other apps, were failing to do was make it fun in any way. And I can give you a little bit more on sort of the background and why myself and my co-founder are kind of subject matter experts in that area. But the main distinction is at the end of the day, Shmoody is a mental health app. It's a well-being app, but it's actually fun to use. It's actually engaging. And everybody who's a human being probably isn't, but especially younger people, are probably not going to use an app that feels like they're being lectured, that feels like they're being condescended to, or even that they have to learn something. If you're dealing with depression or anxiety, or you're even just stressed or overwhelmed, and I've been in all of those states, more than I would like to, admit at any given moment, the last thing I want to do is learn something. I want to feel better. So that's the main thing. Is Shmoody is built to be fun, it's built to be engaging, and it's built by people who've been through this kind of stuff before. So you're going to feel that as you use the app, that this is a warm and welcoming place, and it's been built by people that understand the struggle. It doesn't feel like a bunch of people in some distant corporation were like, you know what? We should slap some things together and sell it to these young people. There's a big difference. And so that's what sets Shmoody apart.
Yeah, I think it was described to me, you've got other apps or other tools that are very PhD and like you said, lecturous, almost like your dad's talking to you and telling you what to do. And what you've done is you haven't quite gamified it, I don't think, but you've made it very fun and interactive.
We have, and it is gamified to a degree. That's not the only thing going on. But it's gamified where you're earning points and you're getting confetti. And basically our philosophy is like, we're going to treat you like a hero because you took some actions to take care of yourself. And if you were doing pretty good and that action was to go sign up for guitar lessons and to start your marathon training, that's awesome. We're going to treat you like a hero. If you're seriously in it, like deep, if you're depressed, if you're really dealing with overwhelming anxiety, we're going to treat you like a hero because you brushed your teeth, you drank some water, and you called somebody you love. Because actually those things are, you're taking care of yourself physically, you're hydrating your body, you're making a social connection, which science shows is actually very, very important in terms of our mental well-being. We're going to never make it feel like it's science. We're going to say, hey, this is just going to be something fun and easy you're going to do, and we're going to encourage you. But we're going to treat you like a hero. We're going to give you confetti. We're going to have Shmoody Cat come in and start dancing around. And yeah, it's a very kind of human and fun experience.
Well, 2 million downloads, that's a big number.
Yeah, we'll be there soon. We're on the way. And we're past 1 million, about 1.5 million. Yeah.
So I know there's two avenues at play here. One is the direct-to-consumer, or the millennial users like you just described. There's also a university play. Do you mind talking to me a little bit about that?
No, not at all. It's actually one of the things we're most excited about right now, is that we're expanding with major university partnerships. And this came about when we started the app. Our instinct was to say, hey, we built this thing that's really fun. Let's have people try it out. We had 100 users of the app, many of whom were just friends of ours. And then we started getting the word out about it. And we went from 100 to 100,000 in about 9 months. So we're like, wow, we're onto something. People like this and people are getting value out of it. Then we quickly started that path towards 1 million. Well, in the process of that, a little over 1.5 years ago, we got a message from someone who is an administrator at Texas Tech University saying, hey, you guys seem like you have a different and innovative approach to wellness and mental health. And we said, we sure as heck like to think that we do. And that's why we're popular, especially with Gen Z. And they said, well, we have a number of apps that we use, and, without saying anything negative about these apps, but like they weren't getting the usage that they were hoping for at the end of the day. And they said, you guys seem like you're doing something different. And so for us, we had not contemplated that this was going to be a path that we would go down, but it seemed like a very interesting opportunity to do a pilot with Texas Tech. And by the way, some of the other apps they were using, like teletherapy app and peer support app, we were like, we're not going to come in and say Shmoody's the solution to everything. There is no one size fits all solution to wellness. What we're going to do is actually provide the fun Shmoody tools, see if the students like them, see if the data looks good. And also, by the way, build you a hub that connects to those other apps and those other in-person resources and all of your resources, so we can be part of a holistic approach, right? And they said, that sounds perfect. Let's do that. And then the pilot was through the roof. The data was really, really strong in terms of the students reporting how their mood was improving and their habits were improving. So then we did a 1-year partnership with them. And that recently wrapped up, and we renewed a 5-year partnership with Texas Tech, major university. We love them to death. I'm going up to Lubbock tomorrow. I'm going to see folks up there, stay close with them. We have a bunch more partners now, but they're our first, so we'll always have a special place in our heart for the good people at Tech.
Get your guns up. Let's get
It's
them.
just amazing. So now we just have thousands of students using the app. We've gotten better and better at how we show them the data of what's working. And so that was the beginning. And so then just within the last year, we said, hey, we should really start make an effort to partner with other universities. So we're about to add our 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th partner, hopefully this month. And we love these schools to death. These are schools from a major ACC university, to a big school in the South, to a couple smaller schools. We have one HBCU, a historically Black college, which we already have a couple that we're partnering with. So a very sort of diverse group of schools. But for us, it's this natural fit that we can come in and provide a wellness app that the students actually want to use. That's not something that was just kind of slapped together for higher ed. Because again, we don't want to disparage any of the other players out there, but they're sort of not coming from this perspective that we are of like, what is it really like to be struggling with your mental health? So yeah, we couldn't be more excited.
Well, congrats on that. That's fantastic. Yeah. The fact that the students are using it, they're engaging in it, and it's they want to come back. That's huge news. So let's flip to the why. So the message of stronger mental health well-being is paramount in today's day and age. There's so many things going on around us, whether it's a disaster like the Kerrville floods in Texas we just talked about earlier, whether it's the suicide rates, whether it's the economy, the world around us, the news that we're getting from all different directions, social media, get into that as well. Tell me your why. Tell me a little bit about your story. Tell me all about your story.
Sure. And you just feel free though to tell me to cut to the chase if I get, because I could talk about my backstory.
Which has got to be more than just Goldman and being a lawyer.
It is. Yeah. And for the record, I should say that, Goldman was actually in sobriety. So everyone has the same line that you do, which is they're like, oh, I get it. That would make someone want to drink and do drugs. And I'm like, the reality is I never could have walked in the door and gotten a job at Goldman if I was drinking. But
that's why I would be a bad comedian, because I use the joke everyone else uses. I'll have to work on myself.
You can always work on it. You can always improve your material.
All right, tell me more.
So, the short version of my story is I'm someone that kind of grew up with a lot of promise. I did really well in high school. I played sports and did well academically. I went to Duke University as the valedictorian in my class. I'm from Vermont, small place, great place to grow up. But
go Ben and Jerry's.
Go Ben and Jerry's, and Vermont cheddar cheese is the best. What happened for me is that I started to lean into drugs and alcohol as part of my way to sort of overcome being shy.
In college?
In college. A little bit before, but mostly it was started to be in college. And it just sort of worked for me at first. And, it helped me kind of be the guy that I wanted to be, that could actually go chat with a girl or could actually go be friendly with the guys that I thought were cool. Whereas on my own, I was really kind of painfully shy. And so for a while, alcohol and drugs became fun. It became part of my identity, that I was sort of a little bit rebellious because I thought of myself, well, I've been this valedictorian kind of guy. That's kind of boring. I'm like goody two shoes, mama's boy. So, it was sort of fun to be rebellious. And there's still a part of me that likes finding ways to be rebellious. But I've learned that you have to find healthy ways to challenge the norm.
See the beard and the tats.
The beard and the tats, exactly. And this, these are gifts of sobriety too. I started getting tattoos when I got hired at Goldman Sachs, actually, because I need to do something a little rebellious. I'm going to buy very nice bespoke suits, and then under the suit, I'm going to pay really good tattoo artists to do really great tattoos. So I still love that kind of stuff. Right now, I just find healthy outlets. Right, but. For me, I'll spare you a lot of the gory details. I'm happy to jump into some of the gory details. But, for me, drinking and smoking some pot, escalated to heavy alcoholic drinking and cocaine and crack cocaine. By the time I was in law school, I was disappearing every week for 3 or 4 days, smoking crack cocaine. Each time I thought it would be the last time, that got a little out of control. I would get back on track with a couple days of classes and go into the gym. I was never the kind of alcoholic and drug addict who was so physically addicted that I couldn't stop for a day or two. I could, and that's an important distinction. Some people think, well, you're not an alcoholic unless you're drinking around the clock every day. Well, that's late stage alcoholism. Another version of alcoholism that's on the way to that, because it's progressive, it gets worse over time, is the kind of person that can't control it when they're doing it, causes major problems in their life, but then can stop for a period of time. Like everything's fine, but it's not fine. Thursday night comes around. I go back out with the law students, and then I'm like, going to have 3 or 4 beers, I think. Well, I have 5, then I have 6, and I have 7, and then I've disappeared. And now I'm up for 3 or 4 days. So it got really ugly. And that went on for years after law school. I was barely employable for a lot of that time. I would sort of pull myself together and get sort of a little bit of like a temporary legal job, or I did real estate in New York for a little while. And I would actually, have a sale happen and be like, oh, that's great. That's a success. And it would make everything worse because I'd have some money, And so I laugh about it a bit now, but the reality is I was just a barely functioning alcoholic and drug addict for a long time.
Well, here's why it's not funny. And I know, looking back, as we said earlier, the story belongs to the victors. You get to tell your story, and it's a happy ending so far. I know it's an ongoing journey. The reason it's not funny is because it's an epidemic in our country right now, and it's a lot of it's young people, like the folks in college and high school, trying to get out there, maybe overcome social media or whatever the case may be. But it's an epidemic. The number of, frankly, middle-aged people I know who have liver problems or who are ultimately commit suicide or are struggling to hold a job, it's an epidemic.
Yeah, no, it is. And, and to be clear, the reason I laugh about it with my own story is that I've found that, and this is something that I've learned I stay very connected to the recovery community. I'm very active in showing up, partially to be of service, because I've learned that's good for me. And partially because it just makes me feel good to be part of that. I've got this spiritual medicine I can connect to. And by the way, if I heard myself 13 years ago use a phrase like spiritual medicine, I just would have wanted to puke, right? Because I was like, not only am I not religious, I think anything spiritual is nonsense. I thought I was real smart. Well, it turns out I'm not as smart as I think I am. And that when I'm willing to surrender to something that I don't necessarily even understand, my ego gets out of the way and interesting things happen. But for me, I stay very connected to that world. And in that world, humor is one of the things, and this is actually a partial inspiration for the beginning of Shmoody, was that I met a young guy at one of the meetings I was going to in New York, a recovery meeting. He's like, I built this app for my mental health stuff. He's like, and it's funny. And I was like, holy crap, like this is amazing. Because we know in that world of addiction recovery, that humor can be transformative. It helps you connect to people in a real way. And for people that are struggling with addiction, and this also applies to mental health. And to be clear, Shmoody is for well-being and mental health. It's not an addiction app per se. We have plenty of folks who are still using it that are also dealing with addiction, and it's very useful, but it's broader. But in that world, humor is this transformative thing, because when you hear someone else talking from the heart, and often they'll be being funny. They're telling you what's really going on, and it's a way that human beings connect. And when you hear somebody else tell their story, and you're struggling with something similar, you start to have this sense of hope of like, this person's been through it too. Because what it feels like to be in the depths of this kind of state of whether it's addiction or struggling with mental health is like, no one else feels the way I do. I'm the only one that feels this way. And there's something broken about me, and I'm not going to be okay. So to hear someone else describe those exact feelings, it's very powerful. Like your soul sees it, like connect here somehow. And that's like at the foundation of what we do in addiction recovery. So
and my hope is that your story today impacts others.
I hope so.
And helps them with their struggles. As I said before, we learn our best from other people's stories or from stories. And I'm so glad you're willing to share your story with me and with our audience today.
Absolutely. No, and I hope and that's why I'm very open about it. And it's not, I hope no one that hears my stories about, geez, crack cocaine and, alcoholism, will think it's in poor taste. But to me, it's important to be honest, because someone that's in that place, that dark place, needs to hear that. So I try to be very open about it.
Well, as we said before, you have a happy ending so far. I know it's an ongoing challenge, which is...
It could all go off the rails tomorrow.
Well, I'm sure that's why you continue to go and give. There are others who haven't had a happy ending and they're struggling with it today. What kind of advice would you give to those folks who are... People tell them they have a problem, they haven't been willing to go seek help. Tell me a couple of things you might advise them to do.
Yeah, well, the first is to just ask for help. No, if you don't want help, there are people. The reality is, Kurt, that there are people that are deep in alcoholism or addiction or other forms of, they're struggling in other ways related to mental health, and for whatever reason, they're not in a place where they want help. Where they want to get better. So that is a necessary piece, and that is up to each individual to decide. Like, do I want to try to get better? For me, there were years where I was like, this is fun. And then it was like, this isn't fun, but I'm pretending it's fun. It wasn't until things got to a point where I was like, I have to stop. I'm damaging not just myself, but the lives of those around me who love me. I've got to stop. And that's when things got scary, because then I wasn't able to stop. So that's the first piece, is just wanting it.
So let's talk about your rock bottom,
Yeah.
where you felt these things and you felt like you had to have help.
Yeah, absolutely. So I thought I'd had a few bottoms along the way. In addiction recovery, you'll sometimes hear that
Like a false summit on a hike.
there's always another like trap door to fall through, or like a false summit on a hike. You think you've gotten there and it's not. The reality is that I know when I've hit bottom when I stop digging. Right? That's the reality. That's it. Because you could always go lower until you can't go any lower, which means you've died. And sadly, that does happen to people, right? But I had a number of things that would have appeared to have been bottoms. I had a situation where I'd already gone to rehab at an amazing rehab institute or a facility in Minnesota, got out, somehow managed to relapse again, called up my father, said, can you help me get into another, like a sober living place to live? And he said, the Salvation Army probably has cots. You could probably stay there. And he hung up. And that should have been a bottom. And it was in a way. And I was very angry with him. And by the way, I respect him greatly for that now. And I've since made amends to him for a lot of the pain I put him through, which is a gift of recovery. But that wasn't the bottom. I had to get to a point where I had basically pushed everyone in my life that would have anything to do with me and that cared of me completely away. The last person that hung on there, this isn't surprising, was my mother. It's not something that as a grown man is like comfortable to talk about, but that, oh geez, at the end, it was just me and my mother trying to help me, and even she couldn't. That's a very sad story, but that's the reality of where things got to. And when I saw that I was like devastating her life, because I'd already kind of accepted the fact that my life was just going down to, but when I saw what was happening to her, I had this true bottom. I tried to move into her condo in Connecticut and said, don't worry, I promise it'll be okay. And then it wasn't okay. I relapsed again and dragged her into it. And I had this bottom where I felt like I gave up on my ability to manage this problem. And a lot of people, I think normal people, civilians, as we say, would say, well, don't give up. Don't ever give up. But in this instance, as it relates to my alcoholism and my drug addiction, I had to give up. I had to deeply be broken to believe that I was not able to manage it, and that I would be willing to do anything to get better. Because I'd already been going to some 12-step stuff, but I wasn't really doing the deal. I was very skeptical of them and their spiritual ways. But I got so desperate on February 12th, 2013, that I called everybody I knew who was in recovery, including a guy who used to sponsor me. And he said, Nate, I used to ask you if you really wanted this. And you would say, well, what I really want is to keep having fun and not have bad stuff happen. He's like, you thought that was cute. Well, it doesn't appear that that's one of your options. It appears that your options are you either do everything in your power to go this other way, or keep doing things your way. And that was a moment when I said, I'm willing to do anything. I'm willing to go to all these meetings, even if I don't like them. I'm willing to call other people and ask for help every day, even if I don't want to. I'm willing to do the spiritual work that doesn't make sense. And for me, there was a spiritual surrender where I became willing to get on my knees and pray. And this is from someone that's not religious, nor was I spiritual. Now I'm spiritual and very open-minded about religion. But that was the surrender.
Wow.
I surrendered. And that was February 12th, 2013.
February 12th, 2013.
Yeah.
Cool.
And it's been this journey since then.
Man.
Yeah.
Congratulations on 12 years, 13
Got it.
years.
12, coming up on 13.
And I know it's a date that will live in infamy, so to speak. I've got one of my best friends, John Clint, is 37 years, I think, sober, and he goes to AA 3 or 4 times a week, and it continues to help and sponsor and mentor. And I know I've introduced you to him, and I appreciate you reaching out to others who need help. So tell me about your mentor, the person who sponsored you. Are you willing to share his name and give him a shout out?
Well, there's been a number of them, right?
Okay.
So the idea is, this is my suggestion. I'm not going to get heavy into like suggestions for people in 12 steps, but if you find someone to mentor you, to quote unquote sponsor you, and if it doesn't work out, great, just get another one, because human beings disagree a lot.
Yeah.
And guess what? Alcoholics in early recovery disagree even more. Because you're like, I've got to know what to do with my life. It's like, you've been sober for 6 weeks. You're living in your mother's basement. You have no idea what to do with your life. But there's been a bunch of them. And I couldn't call them out by last name anyways, because of, that said, these men who know who they are have changed my life. And I hope that I'm able to, in the work that I do, with gentlemen in the program, give it back part of that, because that's really what it's about. Because the weird thing is, part of my own, and this part relates not just to what we're talking about with alcoholism and addiction, but it also relates to my mental health and my well-being, because I've dealt with anxiety. I've diagnosed generalized anxiety disorder. These days it's very manageable if I'm doing these same things that are these actions that I learned in recovery. The biggest one is, am I being of service to others? In this interesting, selfish way, if I find Kurt, who's having a tough time today, and I'm able to be of service to him, I actually feel better. So I actually need to go out selfishly and find people to be of service to. But that is such a radical transformation of the way my brain is used to thinking, because my brain, like most human brains, but even more so, is default selfish, thinking about what's in it for me. What are people thinking about me? And if I can just for even a few moments go try to be of service to someone else, the whole wiring shifts. So
that speaks to me. I think I shared with you an article I wrote 2 years ago entitled "Forget Woe Is Me, How Are You?"
Yes.
And the way it was
Great article.
basically came out was I had reached this point where I was so self-absorbed about what was happening to me, struggles I was having, and I was always seeking, what can Nate do for me in this podcast? Can I sell him some services? And a friend hit me upside the head, and I really shifted my mind. And I'm not perfect. I don't do it all the time, but at least in those days, instead of asking Nate what he can do for me, it's really, what can I do for you?
Yeah.
In that sense of service, maybe it help me forget my problems. Maybe it just helped me serve others, but whatever it was, maybe it's just God speaking to me, whatever it was, it changed things for the better for me. And I know it impacted a lot of lives of other people I was touching.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful. And I remember that article, and no, I couldn't agree more. And also, I also feel I do it so imperfectly, it's a joke. I still walk around most days thinking about myself, right? I'm not much, but I'm all I think about. It's the joke, right?
Right.
But I try not to, and I have some practices in my life that help not to. And then I put things that are intentionally inconvenient in my life that I force me to go be of service to others. Like I commit to certain things. And the reality is, I may be driving to something to be of service, and part of me is like, I really don't want to be doing this, but guess what? It's good for me, so I do it. And then hopefully other people are helped. And Lord knows I'm helped, because I'm forced to get out of myself, because I am the problem.
It's almost selfish in a way, as you said, because you feel better about the service.
Sure.
Okay, so I want to touch on 2 things. One is, if we see people around us, first of all, recognizing signs that perhaps they're struggling. So how do we extend a hand to them and reach out to others who don't ask for help? And then I want to ask, on a similar note, how do we encourage those in our audience, or those we can forward this to ask for help? Because I know it's not easy to ask for help. So let's start with, what can we do to support others? How do we reach out to them?
Well, I'll start with that. I will say the second of those two, the latter, is easier for me to
Let's start
offer the suggestion. Oh, you're right. And I'll tell you why. It's the way that I've learned how to be sober, and the way that I've also sort of learned my path in mental wellness and recovery there is attraction rather than promotion. Most people don't like to have something told to them or sort of forced on them, especially when they're struggling. And I was the same way. And so when people said, you better stop it with your drinking, or like, maybe you should see a therapist for your anxiety, I was like, F you. That was my big response. F you. And
understand, what does F you mean?
And so basically, I had to I had to want what someone else had. I had to see other men who were living their lives in a different way that I felt like I want to also live my life in that way.
Mm.
And so I think, there are obviously things we can do. The first question that you had, we can, if someone's really struggling, we can offer to put them in touch with someone who's like, let's say it's sober if they're struggling with alcoholism, or, if they're struggling with their mental health, or they're dealing with depression, if they've got really bad stress and overwhelm, we can say, hey, we can help you find a good therapist, right? And that absolutely can help. But to me, the question of what do I say to somebody that wants to ask for help, that's where I think I have something to offer of substance, because I used to think that asking for help was a sign of weakness, and that is fundamentally untrue. Asking help is a sign of strength. It takes great courage to admit where one is falling short, right? That takes courage. The human desire is to appear strong while inside being full of fear. Well, to be dominated by fear is not the strong thing. We all struggle with fear. I mean, every day we all struggle with fear, whether we want to admit it or not. The path of asking for help is the strong path of saying, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I need help.
So asking for help requires courage and strength.
Absolutely. And that might sound like a simple idea. In fact, it's a very simple idea, but constantly people are missing that and failing to ask for help. Not because they're fundamentally weak, but because it's very hard to do, because the ego hates it. And that's why, and I could go on a whole long rant about the value of just finding things your ego hates. When I got down on my knees and prayed on February 12th, 2013, as somebody that had never believed in God, as somebody that didn't think anything valuable was to be found in spirituality, my ego hated that so much, it changed my life forever. Like, for a brief moment, my ego just was destroyed. Now it's since come back. It always comes back. It's like a weed. It's always coming back. But for a brief moment, it was so decimated. And that could be different for somebody else, right? And that's especially true for addiction and alcoholism, that letting the ego be completely decimated. That's what happens when you ask for help in various ways. And so to somebody that wants to ask for help, I would say do it, and have faith that doing so does not appear weak to other people. First of all, there's people that want to help you. People like me selfishly need you to reach out to me, right? If somebody hears this, seriously reach out to me. I'm not kidding. I will talk to you. And I might not be the guy that can help the most, but I can help you by putting you in touch with somebody else, And so that, at the end of the day, is the single most important thing. Asking for help is an act of strength. It takes great courage to admit where you're weak. And it opens up the door then for all these other things to happen, which is the other people to come in and offer their advice, to offer their expertise, to just show you a different way to live.
I love that. You're asking people to help others by asking for help.
Yes.
Because people like you, people like me need to help others.
Exactly.
And so selfishly for us, you're helping us feel better about ourselves, and we're helping another human being.
Yeah. Yeah. There's this, I used to go to this meeting in New York City where my early sobriety happened. It was a very big meeting. And there'd be a part of the meeting where they would ask for people that could be sponsors or mentors to raise their hand. And this guy would do the announcement sometimes, and he would say, in this program, we help the sick and suffering alcoholic. Would everyone who can be a sponsor to others raise their hand? And people would raise their hands with a little bit of pride, because they have the ability, because these are the sick and suffering alcoholics you can help by asking them to sponsor you. So you're actually helping someone else by asking for help.
Wow.
But yeah, it doesn't mean it's easy though. And so, it's something that people have to, there has to be a willingness there, but by all means, there are people that want to help.
So let's go to the harder question to answer, which was, how do you identify folks who may need help, and how do you show up for them? And I know you said it's a tougher question to answer. Do you want to make a couple of passes at it, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just, I think it's letting people know. I think it's usually not that hard to. That's not true, actually. I was going to say it's not that hard to tell. Some people are suffering in silence and doing a good job of hiding it.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm going to be honest. I don't know what the right answer there is, other than to be an example. So my hope is that I'm not just an example of someone who's sober and hopefully living a life where I'm being of service and hopefully I'm inspiring some people along the way and doing cool things. Um, but I also am telling my story so that other people can see like, oh, this guy used to be a mess, and now he's not. So I think just living by a strong example and being open about one's own struggles opens the door for other people who might be suffering in silence.
A friend gave me a quote a few maybe months ago that I felt was very powerful, and I use it with friends, especially female friends, where you don't really know what they might be struggling with. But the question is, do you need help? Like you're telling me something. Do you need help? Do you need a hug, or do you need to be heard?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's just to be heard.
Sure.
And I think that goes for folks struggling with any kind of pain, or they might just need a hug.
They might, yeah, or to be heard. I mean, I like that, and I think the reality is that things like depression hit people really, really hard. I've struggled with it a little, not nearly as much as some others. My co-founder and business partner actually dealt with very, very serious clinical depression for a long time. But the hard part, I think, is, we would never judge that person. They're dealing with something that's outside of their control, and it's really, really sad. And I think offering to listen is one of the things you can try to do. Offering to say, hey, I can try to get you help. But, unfortunately, sometimes, like, you can't beat yourself up for saying that, hey, like, I could have done things differently. Unfortunately, your friend was clearly really, really struggling. And so it's a very, very hard thing. And unfortunately, there is no cure for things like depression, for various other kinds of mental health struggles. There is no cure. There's things we can try to do. And a big part of that is just letting people know that there is help available. But unfortunately, not everyone's going to find their way to help. But we just have to do the best we can as human beings to be there for other humans. And I know that you make an effort to do that. And I'm sure that other folks that are in your orbit do as well. But that's all we can do. And then every once in a while, we're rocked in the state of like, holy crap, because there are people that we know that were struggling, but we didn't know how bad it was. And
yeah, it's powerful, and it's real.
Yeah.
So let me dive a little bit deeper into this concept of seeking help.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned to me the other day that seeking help is a superpower
Mm-hmm.
of yours.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
it's something that really requires strength and courage. You're also writing a book
Mm-hmm.
entitled "Asking for Help."
Ask for help.
Ask for help.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, first of all, I did not know for sure if the final title will be Ask for Help. That's the working title, and I have deliberately refused to look up whether there is a book of that title, because if there is, I feel like that might be discouraging. And for now, I just want to write this awesome book, and then if we have to change the title later, we'll change the title later. It's all about taking the action. I also want to be clear. I do think asking for help is a superpower. I do think I've learned how to do it pretty well. I certainly don't want to be sounding like I have this amazing superpower because I'm so great. I'm so courageous. The reality is I'm still always full of fear and self-doubt, but I've found ways to move through that. And I do think that's what real courage is. I've learned how to be right-sized, to not be full of myself, but also not be putting myself down either. I'm someone that when I consistently ask for help and then try to be of service to others, help others, amazingly cool things seem to happen in my life. And so I'm writing a book that supports basically a lot of what we already do in Shmoody, which is to provide people with awesome and easy tools to use to feel better, but then also encourage them, say, hey, you should also be reaching out, in this case, for a therapist, or you should also reach out if you have an issue with addiction for addiction resources, or you should also be reaching out for additional peer support. Or whatever it may be at the colleges we work with, you should also be reaching out for academic support. So we're helping people learn how to do that. But it's also been a part of my entrepreneurial journey, right? Is like being willing to admit that there's huge areas that I don't know the answer to everything, right?
So asking for help in a professional sense.
Asking for help in a professional
Is that
sense.
a double entendre? I'm not really sure about my English.
Is it a double entendre? I don't know if it's
dual meaning.
Yeah. But I asked for help early on. I asked for help. I'll give a shout out to someone who I don't know through the rooms of 12-step recovery, so there's no anonymity issue. But a gentleman by the name of Will Hurley, aka Worley, who I met through Goldman Sachs connections because he'd built this really amazing startup, and then it was eventually acquired by Goldman Sachs. Honest Dollar. Um, he's somebody that when I was in this phase of working at Goldman Sachs, where I was like, this has been a gift of sobriety that I somehow found my way into this place that's full of all these high achievers and very intense. And I learned a lot of skills, and most of them were the soft skills. Like I learned a lot about finance, but the real thing I learned how to do is like suit up and show up with type A assholes, basically. I mean, nothing against Goldman, but it's like an intense place, right? Which is good. You need to learn that skill set, in my view. And I had 5 years there and worked my butt off and got promoted. But I was like, this isn't what I'm going to be passionate about long term. So I'm going to need to like start reaching out to people professionally, kind of in the same way that I learned how to do, because I was lucky enough to have gone through 12-step recovery and learned how to ask for help there. So I started having coffee meetings and phone calls with all these people and asking them if they could help. And most people couldn't, and that was fine, right? Being okay with like a lot of people saying no, that's part of it. And then eventually I connected with Worley, and I was like, I'm heading out in Austin. He's like, it's like, maybe we can get coffee. He's like, no, you're coming to my pool party. That's like, next thing I know, I'm meeting this amazing guy at this pool party that was wild. And we basically become friends. I'm like, this is amazing, because this is a very successful guy, and I'm asking him for help. Can you help me figure out what the next step is for me? Because I'm working at Goldman Sachs. I don't really want to practice law, nor do I want to work in investment banking. These are just really interesting steps on my professional journey to something else, but I don't know what it's going to be. And he's like, I can help you, but if I do, you better be willing to do what I say. And then I formally asked him, I was like, this was a hard question to come out of my mouth. I said, will you mentor me? Will you be my mentor? And you hear a lot about mentorship, but very, very few people in my experience actually ask someone formally. It feels like asking like someone to the prom. Like they might say no, and that could be devastating. And in this case, because I had this experience from 12-step recovery of asking like somebody, will you sponsor me? And sometimes guys would say, no, I can't. I'm too busy right now. But eventually you find someone. And I was like willing to ask that question. And he's like, yes, I would be honored to. But if we go down the path that I think you should go down, which is to become an entrepreneur and build something that you're passionate about, where you can help people that's aligned with your mission, you better be willing to take the actions I say.
Wow.
And I was like, let's do it.
What a gift he's given you with to help you outline your future. But what a strong step in your case to ask for if you'd be your mentor.
Yeah.
It sounds like a simple question.
Yeah. It is a simple question, and it's a very hard one to ask. Man. Simple but hard. And I'm really glad I do. I can still remember I was pacing around the kitchen of my Williamsburg, Brooklyn apartment. He was in Austin. I was in Brooklyn. I was talking to him. We'd have these semi-regular check-ins on the phone. And I was like, I want to ask you, would you be my mentor? And I remember exactly where I was. And he said, I'd be honored to. And it's changed the course of my life because he's amazing. He's opened doors. He's pushed me to do things that I wouldn't have ordinarily done. That's part of why having somebody as a mentor is so valuable. There's accountability. But also that first step of having the humility to ask in the first place, I think is huge. And the willingness to know that they might say no, and that's okay too. I've asked some other people to be mentors, and in some cases they said, I can't really do like the full mentorship, but I can still help you in certain ways. And I said, that's amazing. Let's do that. You know? So.
Awesome. Well, we're at the point where I want to cover some of your unlocking moves. Sure. Those key pivotal moments that really change your trajectory. I can guess a couple based on what you described. But any you want to dive into a particular, or just highlight that you've already covered? So,
and specific to entrepreneurial journey, because in my life, the unlocking moves was the single biggest thing was surrendering to the fact that I was an alcoholic and an addict. Bringing in the help of others in the form of recovery and the spiritual connection. We've already talked about that.
Let me go back on one thing there, because in my article, I listed 3 things that people can do to, in this What Was Me article. One of the things that really stuck out for people was what I described as surrender as resign as the CEO of the universe. You're not in control.
Yeah.
There's greater powers in control. Something else is in control. You are surrender yourself. So you're saying exactly that.
Yeah. Well, and let me just make one point without over intellectualizing that point that you just made, though. But that is a very powerful point. Resign as the CEO of the universe. I've forgotten that phrase. I'm glad you brought it up, because I just want to make a point about spiritual for people that hate the idea of it. And it's okay if you do. But for me, I resisted so much this idea of like a higher power because I was just not religious. And I was like, I'm not going to believe this just for me. I'm not going to believe in this God that has a beard and lives in the sky. And it was explained to me that in recovery, a higher power can be anything you really want it to be. It just can't be you, right? Well, so 5 different people who have experienced recovery from alcoholism or addiction can have 5 different versions of a higher power, right? One could be the Christian God, one could be Hindu God, one could be the Mother Nature, all these different things, right? And recovery's worked for all of them. So clearly, it's not about that your belief is correct because 5 people had 5 different beliefs. What's the commonality between those beliefs? It's that all 5 of those have resigned from being the CEO of the universe. They said, I'm not it, it's something else. In each case, they're believing something that may or may not be true. It very likely isn't completely true, but it points them in that direction of resigning as the CEO of the universe. And that's when change starts to happen. So I love that phrase. And that was the biggest unlocking move in my life, was that surrender. Now, professionally, I think asking for mentorship was really, really important. A really interesting opportunity came along when we brought on our first VC funding. So this was 4 years ago now, when we were early in our growth. And we had an opportunity to join an accelerator program here in Austin, Sputnik ATX. I always give them a shout out because they've been so amazing for us. Our opinion at the time was that there's a lot of crappy accelerator programs that exist. I think that's probably still true in many ways. I don't want to judge any given one. But when we went into that, we had a mission and we had a drive and we had an early version of an app that was pretty cool. But by being open-minded and working really hard, and absorbing what they were teaching us, we learned a lot. And one of the most important things, other than really track your metrics really closely, was test everything you're doing. Be willing to test. So when we wanted to grow, for example, we had 100 users of the Shmoody app and they loved it. We needed to get the word out there. Well, do we need to do Facebook ads? What do we need to do? And we read a book called Traction. There's actually 2 books called Traction. It's the one by Weinberg, the DuckDuckGo guy.
Okay.
And there's another book called Traction that's also quite good, that's for slightly later stage companies. And basically it says that if you want to grow, you need to test these 19 possible traction channels to let people know that you're there. And one of them could be, social media ads on Facebook, but all these different ones. And it says you need to go through and brainstorm and then test a bunch of things. So we tested a bunch of things that we thought wouldn't work. And one of them ended up working really well, which was me creating these funny memes about Shmoody and having meme influencers post them online. So I could tell this whole funny story. It's too long for this format, but how I was the meme lord in chief for the early days of Shmoody, where we were growing by connecting through humor to young people who are looking for our solution, who are looking for a toolkit like Shmoody, but that didn't want some BS that felt really corporate. Wow. And we had and humor got through to them, right? So anyway, that was an unlocking kind of a move to test a bunch of different things. It wasn't that we were geniuses and we knew that funny memes were going to expose us to thousands and thousands of people who wanted the app. We also tested Facebook ads. We also tested TikTok. We found different ways to try to get the word out. But by testing a lot of different things, we found a way that really connected with a lot of people, many of whom are still Shmoody users.
So asking for help from a potential mentors, ultimately identifying Worley as somebody that would be a good connection, and him helping you out in many ways, being part of the Sputnik ATX Accelerator, and testing different things, that not just settling on one thing or putting all your eggs in one basket, but testing up to 19 things in the book Traction.
That's right. All
right. Can I assume that, I don't know how you got the job at Goldman, but the way you described your past, getting the job at Goldman was huge, because now it's a foundational, very respected firm, as you said. That had to have opened some doors, maybe with Worley or other people down the line. How did you get that job? That had to be an unlocking move.
Yeah, that was really interesting. So, and I'll try to give the short version of it, but it came from spiritual work, and that's going to sound super lame to the people listening to us that don't want to hear anything more about spiritual.
It sounds like it's real.
Yeah. Maybe I just need to get over my self-consciousness about the fact that I now have a robust spiritual life, and the 14 years ago version of me.
I would challenge you for that. Absolutely.
So, Like it or not, it was a spiritual experience where I was in recovery. I was improving my life in terms of, not just being sober, but like learning how to have healthy relationships and show up for myself and take care of myself and all these things that were going really well for me. I still noticed I wasn't having any real professional traction. I was working these kind of dead end legal jobs in my first couple of years. My first 6 months of sobriety, I worked at the Starbucks in Simsbury, Connecticut, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Talk about having to get humble. For every once in a while, I'd be like, "Do you know who I am?" In my head, I'd say that, and I'd be like, "No, I'm a guy that burnt his life to the ground and now needs to work at Starbucks and go to meetings every day to re-enter into society." Right? But so by the time I had a couple years of sobriety, I moved back to New York. I was working these kind of dead end legal jobs. And I started to do some spiritual work around, are there some things that might be like blocking me because my past was such a mess? Am I hanging on to some like limiting beliefs there? And I started looking for things that my ego would hate, much like it hated prayer. I was praying regularly because it was working. I was like, I've got to surrender on a new level. I was introduced to this weird way of doing these affirmations, which made me want to puke, right? Like, do you remember Stuart Smalley?
For sure.
Like, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me, right? So something about the lameness of the affirmations, that was a feature, not a bug, right? Because my ego hated it so much. I started doing these affirmations around things like, I have so much value to offer. And I got offered this temporary position as a lawyer working for this group at Goldman. And I started to build relationships. That's something I'm good at. I started to learn about the financial side a little bit. That's something I'm good at. But I was still just doing this temporary thing. Something happened where I was doing these affirmations, showing up a little bit differently. And one of the managers there, pretty senior guy, intimidating guy, pulled me aside and he said, Nate, it seems like you have a pretty good understanding of the capital markets. Have you thought about joining the team full time? Now, I just, in my mind, part of me was like, explain to him why that's not a good idea, why you're not qualified. I had no finance background whatsoever at that time, right? I literally, after he walked away, pulled out my phone and Googled capital markets. I literally didn't know that's just the market for stocks and bonds. I was like, what does that phrase mean? Like, I literally didn't, but instead of explaining to him why that was a bad idea or whatever, I just said yes. And he goes, would you like to go interview with the managing director, who is this somewhat intimidating British gentleman? I said, yes. He says, do you think you can do 3 or 4 interviews next week? So, because at Goldman, the interview process is like, you have to interview with like 10 people. It's like, yes. And I moved through it. So it was just this opportunity that seemed to arise, but it was while I was actively working on these sort of self-worth, growing, putting myself in uncomfortable situations, and one thing led to another, and then I was hired full-time, worked my butt off, got promoted, etc.
I love that. I got to do 2 things. One is I want to give a shout out to one of my coaches, Eve, who gave me 2 things. One, resign as CEO of the universe. I'm sure she's not the originator of that, but she shared that with me. The other is fake it till you feel it.
Okay.
And it kind of goes along with your affirmations. You had this immediate gut reaction like, oh shit, I'm not qualified for this too. Yeah, I can.
Yeah.
And then ultimately you became confident enough to have the conversations, you got the job, and then you started feeling it. And now you're a legitimate freaking investment banker from Goldman Sachs. That's huge.
Yeah. And it did all happen by, sort of faking it at first. It just and for me, that just looked like, just say yes and don't explain a bunch of stuff why it's a bad idea. But there was this weird desire to self-sabotage, And to me, a lot of my recovery, whether it's in the addiction recovery or my growth as a human being, because to me, that's what this is all about. It's like, can I grow as a human being and then be helpful to others and help inspire them to grow as human beings, right? That's what it's about. That's the mission in my life. If I'm doing that, I'm feeling good. But to do that, I gotta like move through a lot of like old limiting beliefs and nonsense that's like, I'm not good enough, I don't have anything to offer. And so at the beginning, yeah, maybe fake it. And then after a while, you start to feel it. And now I know that if I go into a situation, even if I'm not like the biggest expert, like I can ask for help, like I've talked about, and people will respect that. So I'm like, I know that I have something to offer, right? Why don't I just show up, not disqualify myself, and then see where I can add value, and then ask for help on the things I want to learn. And I start to feel more confidence. which is very different than the old days, which was cockiness, which is all based on lies.
There's a fine line between arrogance and or confidence and cockiness,
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah.
Okay, so I've got two more questions
Okay.
for you, and I might have a third. First, I call the listener's advocate question, and that is, if I've got Nate Thomas here on a one-on-one opportunity, what would I want Kurt to ask? What kind of thing is burning in my mind?
Mhm.
And I've got two. The one that I have written down, and then the one that I thought of as we're going. You told a little story, a little snippet about your father saying, "Go find a Salvation Army cot,"
Mhm.
and then you said you made amends and whatever.
Mhm.
That's tough. Tough love is was back powerful in the day when my older brother was having challenges with my mom and dad. That's hard for him to do. You said you respect him, the hell out of him, for doing that. Now,
Mhm.
tell me a little bit about that process, and it was obviously hard for him to do,
Yeah,
but probably the right thing for you.
I think it probably was. And, and I can't describe what was going through his mind at that time. To me, it felt like at that time, like, what, doesn't he love me? And now I can see, like, no, he loved me a lot. And he'd gotten to a point where he'd really tried to help a lot. He'd lend me money to get out of a jam, and I would, probably not even pay it back, or he would do and he'd done what he could to get me into this really great rehab. And then, that's really helping. And then here I was back out on the street calling up for help again. So it wasn't that he didn't love me. He felt the need to lay down a boundary. I think that's the healthiest thing to do. And the process, as I can describe it, is how I then came to let go of that resentment, which is part of the spiritual work that I have to do regularly, because as a human being, I develop resentments towards people, and those just get in the way. And then how I had to own my part of it, and not be like, as far as I'm concerned, this isn't about him. He did what he needed to do, and plus I can't control that anyways. Do I want a relationship with this man who raised me and who clearly loves me? Heck yeah, I do. So to do that, I'm going to have to go make things right and take ownership for my part. And the thing I'll say about an amends process is the most important part is amending your behavior. It's not saying you're sorry. That goes a little ways. What really, when you say you're sorry and then you just keep acting the same way. So the most important thing I can do for my mother, for my father, for the people that count on me in my life is to keep living on, right living, to keep on the right path. All the ways that we've talked about. Yeah. And if I do that, doesn't mean that him and I like never have any tension. Like we sometimes do, but our relationship is great.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
That's awesome.
Right. And so that's an amazing thing.
Man, what a great story. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. My last question is, it's really a trick question. And that is tell me one question that no one ever asks, and either you wish they would ask you, or you're secretly glad that they don't.
That nobody ever asks. Wow. And could this be related to, you mean specific to entrepreneurial type of stuff?
I've got one in mind if you don't come up with one.
Let me hear what you've got in mind, because I'm blanking right now.
You're not on social media.
Oh, there you go.
Why?
Good question. So I have very specific reasons to not be on social media. Now, I want to make it clear two things. I don't judge other people for being on social media. And I do get that there's value, for a business or a company or a brand to be on social media. Shmoody has an Instagram presence that's quite strong. We have a lot of funny memes that are out there because that's how we connect through humor to young people, and they love us, right? So personally, do things happen when I get on social media? Because I used to be I'm off for about 5 years now, maybe. Maybe a little longer than that. Two main things would happen. I would post some stuff and immediately turn into like a 13-year-old version of myself where I'm just validation seeking.
Who's hurting me?
Yeah. How many likes do I have, etc. And I'm like, this validation seeking behavior, this is something I'm working on having less of in my life, right? Because I'm a human being. Like I go through the world and I like validation. Some of that's normal. I don't need to be adding fuel to that. And the second piece is, even when I'm not posting anything, for me, this is just for me, I'm going through and pretty harshly judging everyone else. This person's not living their life the way I think. This person's doing this dumb. And so this may or may not apply to other people, but for me, it was just these two things, seeking validation and judging, that are already things that are problematic in my life that I'm trying to have less of. And so it would just, to me, seem like a no-brainer to let it go. Social media is addictive, right? So it took a minute or two to let go of it, but I'm really, really glad I did. And so for me, it just feels like this healthier way to go through life. And of course, I'll use social media as a tool to get the word out, in terms of what Shmoody does and things of that nature, because that can have a positive impact. But in my personal life, I just stay away.
Well, I hate to burst your bubble, but LinkedIn is a form of social media.
That is true. So you're right. I do use LinkedIn because it is a great way to connect with people. And it's like, it tends to be less performative. It can still be performative, but
I'm an adult Facebook or grown up Facebook.
yeah.
Hey, so since you're not on social media, how can people connect with you? Is it LinkedIn?
Yeah, LinkedIn is a good way to connect with me. I'm on there, Nate Thomas, it's Shmoody. And they can meet me in person if they really want to. I'm not that hard to find. People can find my email if they want to reach out, but LinkedIn is the easiest way to connect with me. And for me, I love connecting with other human beings. I just make a distinction with like the social media stuff where like if I'm doing it personally in a way where I start to feel like I'm sort of cultivating an identity or an image or things of that nature, doesn't feel as authentic to me. So, but I'm happy if people want to reach out on LinkedIn. Certainly anyone that's having a hard time, that's struggling, I'm happy to connect and either talk or connect them with someone that can.
I'm glad you said that because you said earlier, if anybody needs help, please reach out. So please reach out to Nate Thomas on LinkedIn or otherwise, or reach out to Kurt Wilkin, and we'll make sure you get help because we want to be there for you, and we're selfish.
That's right. That's right. We need that.
So Nate, on that note, we're going to wrap this puppy up. I'm going to ask our audience to go like and subscribe wherever they consume their podcast, YouTube, Apple, Spotify. And I want to thank you for joining me and sharing your story. It means a lot. I know you impacted a lot of lives today. So thank you.
I appreciate that, Kurt. It's been awesome talking to you.
If you're an entrepreneur and you think you might have outgrown a member of your team, or maybe you've got a mic, as we talked about in Who's Your Mic, check out this quiz at who'syourmic.com/quiz. That's who'syourmic.com/quiz.